Welcome to Talking Apes, the For Media and Events podcast. Um, Jeff, I mean, we kind of thought about this whole thing yesterday. I literally got on the phone and I said, well, man, so many different things have changed. And I really think that we could have a perspective on how, you know, life as a salesperson has changed working from home.
Yeah, it is funny. Like everything that we've known for 2, 3, 4 years now have told us about the importance of face-to-face visualization, selling, video conferencing, what the important things are. Going into the video kind of review of this is kind of a continuation of that.
Yeah.
Knowing how important it is. And so for I think a lot of us in this industry, there's that fear of putting yourself out there. And this is what I think we're both trying to conquer in terms of making this video and kind of sharing our experiences and trying to, I think what we've both been passionate about is elevate this industry.
Yeah.
Right. So
Absolutely, man. And I think it kind of boils back down to, our lives have changed significantly. I know, we, kind of had a lot of changes in our personal lives before this whole, COVID-19 situation came about. We've kind of both found ourselves looking for new employment and had a conversation about, hey man, there's this huge gap in the industry. Nobody really understands how to effectively market themselves on a micro level. And we came about with this idea of trying to bring marketing on a very, very grassroots base back into the construction industry. We know that a lot of these big players in the market have a lot of dollars behind them. They have the ability to kind of put out big marketing campaigns, national, international campaigns. A lot of the multinational companies within our industry, but who's really looking after the small time contractor? So that's kind of where we came about the idea for our business. And I mean, literally as we were getting started, it was what, March 1st or 2nd, I think you filed the board of like the incorporation, and then it was just like, well, shut it all down, we're done.
well, and it was really interesting because we came out of the gates and the second part of our business, which was the event side, had the traction immediately because we were coming from the industry and we really knew what we wanted to do with that. And so that was the first thing that hit. And then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, let's stop. Because that was essentially how we were going to elevate into going into this marketing was to get the message out about, hey, we're doing things differently.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting going to this now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what would you say is kind of changing your daily schedule from, January to today?
Oh, well, I would say that the biggest change, and if I had to pinpoint it on the Corona style or the Corona issue, is that being a salesperson, the one thing that that's very important to me is relationships. And so going out for a coffee.
Yeah. Oh man, you must be struggling. Can't go to Starbucks every 15 minutes.
Well, we can drive through and stand on the other side of the car from each other, just yell at each other. The interactions, the finding out what's going on, stuff like that, has been a very unique experience for me because I think part of why I've been successful as a salesperson was always relationship-based selling. And it wasn't a casting a wide net and emailing 400 people. It was really focusing on a small group of people and working with them to develop their business.
Yeah. Kind of an 80-20 rule almost, right?
Oh, I would say even greater.
Okay.
I would say that probably 95% of what I did was face-to-face selling, face-to-face communication in terms of kind of meeting their needs. And also it helped me because the body language, you could tell if we were talking about something uncomfortable, you could read it in the person.
Yeah.
So now we're that's why I say for me, this has been really interesting. And also because we had snow and everything, like you can't really, it's been
interesting.
Very difficult. So,
Yeah, I mean, we kind of started this thing, COVID-19 had already kind of taken ahead with full steam, and we were sitting in a place where we couldn't really sit down with people. We couldn't really talk to them. We couldn't, the technique, the methods, the strategy, the style of sales, or even just business discussion, negotiation, conversation, whatever you want to call it. Both of us were kind of in a extremely uncomfortable place where we didn't have those things that we relied on, being able to, look at a person, being able to say, I don't know if they're really comfortable with what I'm talking about. Maybe it's a price issue, maybe it's a this issue, maybe it's a that issue. So I think not being able to do that on the phone, you have a lot of these silences, or maybe you have filler words coming in from the other side, and you can't really, make out what people are saying. So that's kind of why we had this conversation yesterday, and you had said, well, let's just kind of record, some of our thoughts on it and see if people are interested in finding out. And I think one of the key things that you'd started out with was the general basics of working from home, which I think you have quite a lot of experience with.
Yeah. So I guess now it's probably been about 12 or 13 years that I've worked from home, where you're really, you're in charge of your own destiny, right? Like I am a big believer in, sales will give you what you put into it.
Yeah, 100%.
I've always believed that. I don't believe in horrible economies. I don't believe in that, because if you're truly offering something that is going to solve problems, people will purchase, right? It's taking the time to really find that market. Like you'll never ever sell a boiler to somebody who is wanting a furnace.
Yeah.
Right? Like it sounds great, everything kind of like, oh yeah, and then you start really diving into how much work is in, and it's like, you know what, let's just put that new furnace in, right?
Yeah.
So, understanding who you're going after is very big. Now, working from home, there's been a lot of learning curves. I'm sure you've
absolutely
gone through yours as well. And my biggest thing was being with my wife.
Yeah.
Was establishing rules.
Yeah.
Right. So the first thing I do every morning, I don't care. Monday to Friday, there's no sleeping in. It's I wake up. There's a time. I usually wake up 6:30, 7 o'clock. Yeah. I get dressed and I go for that coffee. I get out of the house. For me, that's like, to me, is like going to the office.
Yeah.
And I think just at that point, you're getting dressed, you're doing your hair, you're being presentable for public, right? Now, even if you're coming home and working for the entire day, I think that is tremendously important as you get into that mindset of working.
So the clothing almost serves as a bit of kind of a catalyst for the mental perspective, or creating that attitude towards, okay, this is a work day, it's work time.
Yeah. It's also a strong visual for my wife as well.
Okay.
Because she knows when I'm dressed for business, then there's a potential that I'm either on a video conference call, which I've been doing for the last 5 years with regularity. It also says that, like, I'm also prepared for if something is happening in my general area, I'm ready to go now, right? So it signals to her that it's a work day, it's ready to go, and her schedule is quite all over the place. And so Monday to Friday doesn't exist in her world. That's why I think it was important to have that visual kind of tell, right?
So it's almost as if that, the getting ready, their morning routine for you is setting almost a boundary, a bit of a line in the sand where you can say, this is work time now for me. If I don't really want to be bothered unless it's absolutely necessary or an emergency to a certain extent.
Oh, it absolutely. Like, I mean, for now that we live in Calgary, we've got a nice big house, but our last 10 years have been in 550, 600 square foot apartments. So there's not a lot of wiggle room, right? And I have a bedroom and a living room.
Yeah.
Which means you have an office and a sanctuary.
Yeah.
Right. So coming out of your sanctuary into your office / living room / guest room / dining room /
I feel
whatever. I think that was very important. So again, like the very first thing, have the conversation. Understand that because I'm at home, doesn't mean I can go grocery shopping right now. Doesn't mean I'm taking out the garbage right now. Doesn't mean I'm walking the dog right now. It means that I'm at home working.
Yeah,
right?
I completely agree. I mean, it's you talk about that scenario of living in a 550, 600 square foot apartment. I mean, my wife and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment right now, as you know, and we have we are both working from home at this moment because she's in university and everything's kind of been shifted to a home base, and she's got her own setup on the dining table. I've got my own setup, and it really is good in being able to identify that. And if she sees that I have headphones in or that I'm not really looking anywhere away from my computer, especially if because I usually dress well. I wouldn't necessarily say that I personally dress in dress clothes to when I'm sitting down for work. It's usually, groomed, sit down, and clothes that put you again in that attitude or in that feeling of I'm working, as opposed to sitting around in your underwear and in your wife beater,
casting it,
right? Exactly. And I think seeing that, I think also, like you said, garners that respect from either your partner or your roommate or whoever it is, or even if you establish that with your children, that's another a boundary as well. Something interesting that you had mentioned to me was as important as it is, to get ready in the morning and be presentable and feel presentable. A big part of it was also your actual setup and what that is and what that looks like, and how not only is it important to have a good setup, but it's also opposite to have vice versa, which is having that takedown at the end of the workday as well.
Well, so this might be a bit of a story that illustrates something. So for me, I have my briefcase, and I would travel a lot. And when I would go to my hotel rooms, I would unload my briefcase, and it would have my laptop and my notebook, and it had everything out. My to-do list was prominent.
Yep.
Right. At home, I still take out everything out of my briefcase as if I'm sitting down at a table. But because you're at home and there's no set hours and stuff like that, to shut it down at the end of the day, put your stuff away.
Yeah.
When we were looking for houses in Calgary, all these new houses that we were seeing have an office on the prime floor as soon as you walk in.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And I hated that. And for you guys that have it, I hate it. Because the first thing I do is I come home from my meetings or whatever, I go grocery shopping.
Yeah.
And the first thing I come into, I walk in the front door and I see an office. And I'm sitting there thinking about, okay, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. And I got to get this done. And you never actually shut down. And then the second part of what I hate about it is because I am a very visual person. Mm-hmm. So I usually keep my to-do lists or my whiteboards up with what I have to get done. And
just a constant reminder.
I don't want people coming over and seeing those things.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
Right? Like,
why is that?
Well, number one, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you're not a colleague, I'm keeping it very, very much to myself and my work, my core group.
Yeah.
So I don't want people kind of meddling.
Yeah.
And number two is, again, something like this is we're trying to change an industry.
Yeah.
We're trying to elevate the industry. We're trying to get the end users to maybe even understand our industry a bit more. So for that reason, I do like to keep them down. Like I like to keep it kind of
to yourself,
to myself a little bit.
Interesting.
So the home office thing for me, now my new home office is in my garage.
Okay.
And
Which we're here right now.
which we're here. So this is my new office that I work out
Pretty
of.
nice office. You got bikes and toys and all kinds of stuff going on
Yeah,
over
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Surfboards, dirt bikes,
That's
skateboards.
right.
Yeah.
So the one barrier that I maintain with this is that I actually turn my light on, and the light is on the garage door, and it's on the entrance to the garage from the backyard. And if my wife sees those lights on, it's work hours.
Okay.
Right. And
You almost separate yourself because you have that option here in this new home. You have the ability to kind of, this is my designated space, and when I'm here and the door's closed, I need full
even
privacy.
though it's our garage, it's my
Yeah,
office.
okay. Yeah, absolutely.
But again, that is keeping true to, like, now without Starbucks being open for meetings, I now have broken down. I've got my coffee machine at home. I start my morning off. I make a coffee, and I'm getting dressed to come to the garage, right? And from there, like, I have my coffee and I kind of get in. I go through my emails, I go through my list, and it's kind of like, hey, what do I want to get done today?
Interesting.
And the biggest thing about, again, having that conversation with your spouse, your roommate, whatever, is we all know how much time it takes to get into a topic or a subject, especially if you are greenfielding something or if you're trying something new. And the last thing you want is somebody breaking that momentum.
Yeah.
Because it takes you longer to get back into that than to actually do the task.
Absolutely.
So that's why I say having your space, being comfortable. So if you look around my space, and I'm sure we'll do a tour one day, I've got benches set up, and every night it's clean. And number one, it's also because if it's windy out, I don't want everything blowing around.
Yeah, right.
But number two is, like, when I'm gone from here and everything's put away, now it's my garage. And yes, I get to work on my bikes.
You can fit around with your toys and your Jeep and all that stuff. Right?
And I'm not thinking about work, and there's nothing that's pointing out work to me.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And maybe, okay, so this is your setup here today, where you have the opportunity and the option to kind of have a garage that can be dedicated for this. Something that I've done in the past and continue to do, because in the short 7 to 8 years that I've been, in the workforce, most of that has been working from home or working in a city outside of where we have an established office. And even when we did have an office, being in sales, I think we have the luxury at times to kind of take a few days and do some of a lot of the legwork from home. Something that I did was I'd like to usually set up my home workstation very similar to the way it would look if I had an office.
Yes.
Right. So, and maybe in this sense, I think we defer a little bit. I don't really have a takedown in the sense, but I do have, cabinet, filing areas where, documents and things like that just go in. A laptop can close, but then the laptop also serves as, let's say, my personal laptop for, doing this and doing that. And I find that the desk that I have at the moment also becomes, it's my space. Even though it's a workstation, my wife doesn't use it, even though she has the option to, especially if I'm not working, but she doesn't, because I think there's kind of an understanding between us that that's my space and that's where I work. And she also, being an art student, a design student, needs a lot more room to kind of have all of her, stuff around. Yep. And on the other side of things, something that I find and I've found to be extremely, extremely useful, especially these last 45 to 60 days or so, is noise canceling headphones. I mean, we live in a 1-bedroom apartment. We're both working in the same, within 40 feet of each other. She's got web conferencing going on for her classes. I've got either Zoom calls or WebEx calls or phone calls with people. We have conference calls for our company all the time. And a big thing that we both found to be useful, and she just got herself a new pair of wireless noise canceling headphones, and we both got them on. We really both can't hear each other, and that really shuts down, not only the other person talking, but really any sort of distraction that's there at that moment.
Yeah, because you have a dog and a cat.
We have a dog and a cat, and they do not like each other, right? I mean, that would be putting it very, very lightly. I mean, it's constant, fighting in the house between the dog and the cat. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like when there's kids in that picture. But it really is a huge, huge benefit. And that, if there's something that I could recommend to anybody watching, definitely get yourself a pair of noise canceling headphones. Doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be expensive. Shoot for one that has a microphone built in. That's pretty cool, because then you're not you can sit far away, you can walk away from your desk if you need to grab a glass of water and stay on the call and even contribute if you need to. So that was something that I definitely thought would, as from a personal perspective, I really found to be beneficial. Now,
I do have one question
yes,
for you.
Yes.
Okay, so the fact that you don't shut down.
Okay.
What are your work hours?
I think in that scenario, you might be right in the sense that there isn't really, it kind of all just melds together almost. Like, you wake up in the morning, and luckily I wake up a couple of hours before my wife does. And, I wake up, we have the same routine. I walk the dog, and that's a part of my routine. Come back, pour myself some tea, sit down in front of the desk, and then I'm working. And, at the moment I'm doing a lot of different things. And in the evening, though, it's like the workstation also serves as, if I wanted to play some video games with the guys, I, log on and I use that as a station. So it almost, the attitude of work from when I can remember being in the industry, I do kind of look back and think that it was a bit difficult to tune in and tune out. Yep. Especially when I didn't really have that system with the noise canceling headphones. I didn't really have an ironclad routine of this is what I do, this is the work, and I'm really finding that now having that 8:30 I'm at the desk, right, and I'm trying a couple of new things, so that means 12 p.m. is when I eat, right, and then taking little breaks. And at times, I mean, we've gone way into the night working on whether it's website stuff or marketing projects. But outside of that, I do kind of agree that the takedown is kind of important, even if it means getting the work stuff out of the way, so you can still have the computer there, and all the other your pen holder and all that can be there. Just clearing everything up and putting it in a neatly organized way. And organization is something that is really, really key, and something that we believe in quite heavily. So I think that's something that's benefited me for sure. But you're absolutely right. It is something that I've noticed in the last couple months. Like, you know what? Like maybe this whole letting everything overlap and overflow and be one on top of each other doesn't really create an environment of focus. And that's something that's key.
Well, I think it also, I do a lot of study and research and everything, especially for presentations and training seminars that I've done in the past. And my biggest concern is I always watch time, right? Time has always been something that I paid attention to. My training sessions were 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Yeah. And it's mostly because at the 10-hour mark, your productivity goes down to about 30%.
Absolutely.
And now if we say that you're working those long hours for multiple days, I know when I've traveled, and when I travel, there's 16-hour days. And by Thursday or Friday, like I'm done. Yeah. I'm going through the motions. I'm comfortable with the subjects. Nothing's really challenging, so I can do it. But there's no follow-up. My follow-up starts to lag.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No,
my phone calls start to become, that's a Monday thing. Yeah. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I mean, it's the reality is we have a set number of hours that we work in a week. Some people it's 20 hours. Yeah. Some people it's 65 hours. I would also say it's very dependent on where you are in your career and how long you've been with a company for.
Absolutely.
But we have a set number of hours that we can work in a week. And when you hit that and being aware of that, then your productivity goes right down.
Absolutely, especially when you're selling, right? And that's a huge thing.
And training, for me, was a big thing because now we do all of our training at night, which I hate, I despise. I think it's the worst thing ever. Yeah. Because They start at 7 in the morning. They're at the office. They're getting prepped for their 8 o'clock start, whether it's service or construction or whatever. They go and do their 8-hour day. And then by the time they get to us, they're at hour number 10.
Yeah.
Right? So, number one, you're at 30% capacity again. Right? And it's like, I mean, look
Both
it up.
parties are at 30%.
That's what I mean. Like look it up. Like look at the studies on attention spans and productivity after 10 hours. And you'll be, it's alarming.
It's crazy, yeah.
And so for me, we were talking about very technical things, and you've got a handful of people that are very involved in the conversation or the training, and then everybody else is kind of in coast mode. Nobody's got pens or pencils out. Like the shutdown is apparent. So the training for me, like part of what I love about this COVID thing is that everybody's offering this online training now.
Yeah.
It's during the day, and people are fresh, and they've got their station, and they've got pens and pencils.
Everyone's going super hard on training right now, and it's so interesting to see. I mean, we have a saying in Tamil which is "Tadikkirinda enga paru." It's like it's whatever I can trip and fall and be all over training right now, right? Like that's like it's everywhere. It's all over, all around us, and I mean everybody's got some sort of webinar or some sort of Zoom conference call, and it's like you have the opportunity to learn. And I think that because people are a lot of especially some of the tradespeople that have been either laid off or unpaid or unpaid leave, they have the mental fortitude to actually pay attention, as opposed to most of the scenarios where even I've been there in a lot of those training sessions where I come in at it's 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. I mean, it might not be 10 hours, but towards the end, if you're starting to die, they're starting to die, looking at their phones, they're fading slowly. It's definitely something that needs to kind of be addressed, as well as maybe a bit of a rethink in the industry.
So do you think that now with everybody maybe having more time and doing this, and if people have the benefits, do you think that will actually change? Like, do you think there will be allocated or dedicated days or time slots that people will actually?
Maybe not in a week, but definitely I think. I mean, we'd have to put this back to some of the folks in the contracting and engineering sectors of the industry. I think we're going to talk about this in a bit, but the emphasis and the importance that people really give to training has always been very low, right? I would say continual.
There are some companies out there
Absolutely.
that have training offices,
Absolutely.
and I mean, like,
really invest in that
exactly,
for sure. And kudos where kudos are due, but for the most part, I would say again we'll use the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule here. Probably 80% of the industry sees training. Maybe unfortunately as a bit of an arm of a sales pitch, right? A lot of the time it's perceived as that. And I think that, now with a significant slowdown in the industry, more and more people are attending trainings that are even, not focused on sales, but focused on keeping people, fresh on products and keeping your brand or your equipment or product or accessory at the top of their mind. And I think that the effort that is not going into sales is going into training, and contractors, whether contractors, engineers, anybody on the technical side, really, even salespeople, are seeing huge benefits from that. Whether it's agents, whether it's wholesale staff, whether it's the actual plumber or gas fitter, HVAC technician, anyone that's on there, I think you're seeing a huge benefit. And I think going from that to maybe looking at, from our perspective, or from the perspective of anyone who's really in the sales side of this business, there are a lot of benefits to working from home or selling from home.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And something that I personally really, really enjoyed is, especially, you look forward to that Monday and Friday when, my routine was Mondays and Fridays are for, admin work, prep work, or preparing for your week, setting up calls, or, winding down on the Friday. And
what would a typical week? Like you say Monday and Friday was admin. Like just do a quick run through of what your week would be.
Regardless of where I worked in within the industry in the past 7 to 8 years, I always kind of went through the same schedule. So Monday was usually the day that I confirmed any appointments that I had. I might have had an appointment or two on Monday, but it was usually later in the day. Monday mornings were for making calls, confirming meetings, making sure the appointments that I had set would happen. Sending emails that, like you said, on the Friday, you kind of feel a little bit tired. You don't want to do that. Catching up on a lot of that Friday overhang, and then a lot of it would come down to establishing a framework for the week. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy and very, framework-esque, but it really was something that worked for me. And even just looking at your calendar is something as simple as doing that. Looking at your calendar and me, okay, I got this engineer call on that day. I'm going to meet with this wholesaler on this day. I got 2 contractor calls on Thursday, and then Friday afternoon I have lunch with this person. And I know that all these other projects kind of are either going or going to go or need attention. And then how do you kind of slot that time in there? So that was mostly what it looked like, where Tuesday to Thursday it was heavy travel. And if I was out of town for certain roles, I used to travel across Western Canada. I would travel Monday night or Tuesday morning. Further and further into my career, I started valuing personal time, and I decided to travel at a 6 a.m. on a Tuesday as opposed to a 9 p.m. flight on a Monday. I also think that saved the organization money, the extra hotel night, the car rental, all that stuff, right? And the Tuesday, that just means you got to wake up a little bit earlier. So when you get back home on Thursday, you can catch up on that. Or, when
you get to miss all the traffic and it's
exactly,
horrible.
right? It's terrible, right? But on the Friday, what I would mostly do is it's kind of either a CRM review day, or it would be kind of catching up on the week, as well as maybe trying to book some stuff out for the week following.
Yep.
Right. And then that's where the Monday comes back in with the reconfirmations. So Friday would mostly be a review, follow-ups, all the emails that I got to do. And if I was traveling, I honestly really enjoyed that, because traveling in a way is kind of like working from home, because you're not really at an office. You don't really have other people around you. You're in a hotel on your own. You got nothing to do but work or watch TV, or your evenings. If you're intelligent when you travel, you book dinners or drinks or any sort of event, out events with your clients as much as possible, just to kind of fill that time, because that's valuable time you can get face to face with people. So after that was done, 8:39, let's say I got back to the hotel, it would always be all the follow-ups from the day of. And that was something that really, really rung a bell with most of the people that I dealt with, whether it was manufacturers that I represented as an agent or clients that I sold to as a manufacturer. That really stood out for most people, because they're not used to getting detailed, bullet-pointed email responses that day or that night, right? And then, because the biggest advantage of sending those night emails is that it's the first thing in the inbox when they get in the next day.
Yeah.
That was the huge, huge bonus for me. So, looking at that and then kind of mirroring it to today, that's something that I really kind of take with me right now. Mondays and Fridays are kind of those set up, takedown days, if you will, in terms of the framework of my week. Something that I really, really enjoy, we're talking about travel right now, is maybe not just, not exactly because of COVID, but just the general working from home. But it does specifically apply to our situation right now, is that there's no travel time. Even if you're a local Calgary sales rep, servicing Southern Calgary or, Southeast Calgary, or you have these accounts in the Foothills industrial area or wherever, you don't need to get in your truck or your car and drive to your customer and go see them. I honestly don't even, I know that from a relationship perspective, that needs to happen when we're outside of this, but I see it as an advantage now, because that allows you for the time to, prepare for your meeting or prepare for a call, or go out there and get more meetings, go get more phone calls, get more web conference, all that travel time put together is your time to train or do a webinar.
Yeah.
Right. That's something that I really think is a big positive of being a salesperson working from home. The other thing, honestly, like whenever I've worked in an office, I really enjoy the little chit chat and the conversation you have with the people in the office. It's nice. It's pleasant and fills the time and builds relationships with your colleagues. I think it is important. when you're missing that now, the only person you get to talk to is your wife or your dog, all right, or your kids. I think that or the mirror, right? I think the thing that I really benefit from is having that chit chat with your clients.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that you had mentioned as well when we kind of, we're brainstorming for this, is like, hey, save up all that energy and let it out on the person that actually requires that relationship building, because you don't have the ability to be in front of them face to face and talk to them. I think what you can do is, bring your experience to them and have them bring their experience to you.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking to people right now, like, what are people actually thinking about the future of business, or is it just dwelling on COVID? Because I've found that I phone people and everybody's like, yeah, man, what you're doing sounds great, but I'm packed right now. Like everybody's freaking out. Everybody's nervous. Yeah. We don't know what we're doing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I find it from a sales, whether you're a rep, manufacturer, whatever, I think that people are missing a significant time of preparation right now.
Absolutely.
And I think contractors, I think that we're going to get to a point where, okay, before the lockdown happened, we had 6 weeks of work.
Yeah.
Well, now we're at 4 weeks of that 6 weeks. So what
happens next?
What happens next, right?
Yeah.
And I find that everybody, even with us, has been saying like, oh, we're just dealing with this right now.
It's very, very short-sighted, myopic kind of attitudes. Everybody is, next 2 weeks, we just got to get through. It's like, guess what? It could be 6 months.
But what is the strategy? Like when we talk about the training and we talk about coming out of this and people have watched the training and stuff like that.
They're ready to go,
But what's the marketing strategy? Like,
how do you
how are you selling this? Because like nobody's calling anybody right now. So what do we do? Like, how do we prep up for 3 weeks from now?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that's really going is projects that are already out. And I mean, there may be projects, I don't know about every city or province in Canada, but I do know that places that are heavily unionized are either not working or are severely kind of reduced the number of people working. So, I mean, those are the projects that you could maybe depend on to kind of be going for a little while. But, I mean, in Calgary, on my street alone, there's 3 multifamily, buildings being built, and I haven't really seen a huge slowdown in the number of people that are on site. Maybe they have some sort of thing worked out where they have less people or more distance, but there's definitely a lot of today thinking, a lot of short-term gratification, and this is something that actually one of my father's good friends kind of mentioned to me. I was on the phone with him recently, and he's a very successful businessman that in the Middle East that has kind of grown his operations to Africa and China and India and all over the place. And a philosophy that he mentioned to me was, when things get bad, don't look to shrink and put up guards and try to address the issue. Don't just do that, rather, but also kind of look for ways to grow. And I think this kind of circles back to that, I don't know if it's an idiom or proverb or whatever. English is my second language, but it's the best defense is a good offense, right? And I think that is really a philosophy that I don't see a ton of people applying right now. And maybe that's wrong of me to say, because I don't know the full picture. I'm not in conversation with all these people behind the scenes, and a lot of them, I feel bad for a lot of these organizations that are having to let tons of people go because businesses, the Jenga, slats of bricks are falling every day. Yep. And I mean, there's an interesting saying. It's not that bad when you have to pick the weeds from your garden. When you got to start pulling the plants, that's when you really gotta, that's when you got to take a look at things. But from a perspective, I do agree with you that there is a lot of short-term thinking. There is a lot of like, there isn't really time for us to look ahead. We just got to deal with this fire that's all around us, and to an extent, yes. But once you extinguish that fire, everything is going to be burnt around you. How are you going to grow that, right? right? So I think that plan is something that I really wish that people kind of put together, and it had a little bit of foresight on it. I think some people are doing a decent job of webinars and trainings and keeping their brand fresh, and I think that's going to be a key to what comes next. Well, let's talk a little bit about the industry as a whole. Now we know that the industry in general is going to be significantly changed. You know, the manufacturers from a perspective of working from home, you know, as a manufacturer, you don't really have the ability to get out in front of an engineer and do those lunch and learns. You don't really have the opportunity to be in your wholesale, help them out, or do those, last minute
But how
delivery.
come? Like look at what we're doing right now.
Absolutely, right, and I think that there is an opportunity to be able to leverage technology significantly, right? And I mean, this is another thing that I really felt was true of our industry, is very so behind in terms of what modern technology is, and I want to really emphasize that, you know, there's people out there. There's companies out there. I mean, we recently, I recently worked for an organization that was pretty, ahead of the curve in terms of technology, and they really put a lot of emphasis into, whether it was web conferencing, whether it was having all of their offices and branches and rooms connected, stand desks, and really kind of, investing in the people, investing in the communication, because that's really what this industry kind of, relies on, is communication. So from a manufacturer or an agent perspective, I think, technology is going to be your best friend. Even if you're looking at it from a wholesale perspective, technology is your best friend, and you have so many different tools out there to help you. Whether it's you're as simple as your phone, as simple as your laptop, emails, web conferencing, Zoom, Teams, Cisco, whatever it is, and then on top of that, you have all these other little things that people can opt in for, which nobody really looks at, like your CRM softwares that most sales guys just shrug off as I hate doing this, and you do it as a kind of a chore for management. But now is really the time to sit back and you fill that out and you go back through your old CRM notes, and be like, who are these guys that I talked to back in the day once or twice that I haven't really talked to, and then I can phone them today and have just chit chat about COVID.
Yeah.
You got a great topic to talk to people about. That's something that I would highly recommend people doing, is just go back in your calls. Who haven't you talked to in 2-3 months because they're not a top tier customer and they don't have projects going right now? Let's talk to them. Let's find out what's happening with their life. How is it affecting their business? And be a solution provider to those maybe small or medium-sized businesses that probably don't have a lot of business right now because of the shutdown.
Yep.
Right, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some of the small to medium-sized businesses are booming because there's 4 times the number of people at home all the time, so that toilet's getting clogged every day, right? So who knows? Maybe maybe the plumbers and HVAC technicians are working overtime and are out there on with more volume, just because there's more people at home. There's more demand on this your home comfort. Maybe not from a commercial perspective, but definitely from a residential perspective. What are your thoughts? As a former contractor, what do you think this world looks like today for them?
Well, it is interesting from a contractor's perspective. I found that like so I was predominantly a retrofit contractor for commercial residential.
Yeah.
And so we had our seasons that would peak. And we would have our seasons where we were just full out busy.
Yeah.
And even in a busy year, we would still have those times where we would kind of slow down. And that was the time that we would take to reflect. Okay, how were we prepared for the year? Right? Could we be better prepared for the next year? Did all of our guys, were everybody able to do every install, or did we have to always like check who had the ability, who didn't have the ability? Definitely. And so for me, from a contractor's point of view, if I'm busy right now, I'm thanking the gods that are making me busy, right? if I'm not busy, this would be an absolute time for me to confirm that this is the direction my business is in, the direction I want it to go.
Almost like an audit.
It really is, right? And there was a lot of things that I learned from a business standpoint from when I first got into it. I was everything to everyone, and that was probably my biggest mistake. Number one, I had people that would specialize in certain things, so the vehicles were outfitted with different tools. So, which meant that if I had one guy on the far end of the city, he was the only one who could go to maybe the other end of the city.
Yeah.
Right. And I also realized that there was a lot of things that we were involved in that we just didn't want to be involved in.
Yeah.
Right. They were long time to bill and get paid for. There were things that only a couple of us could do, and there wasn't a lot of money in it. And so those times were the times where we really cut back instead of expanding on those services we didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And we saved money because we didn't have to buy all these tools that we didn't want to have anyway, and we didn't have to store them, and we didn't have to do all this. So this was in our off season. We actually had walls that were set up to train, and so we would keep equipment that we pulled out. And we would train
the other
people.
guys on it.
Yeah. And then we would also so one of the things that I loved about training was that we would set a job kind of parameter. So if we were having to go and do a high output of domestic hot water, we would sit there and have a 45-minute session on what our options would be. Because we always believed in a good, better, best. Yeah. Right? So if you have somebody selling their home, then they don't want the best system in there. They want a new system. Right? And so it was understanding that for a building or for a manufacturing facility, they might have a renovation booked in a year. So again, it's knowing when to give them the good option and just be like, this is what you need. Don't spend money unnecessarily. It was also a good time to illustrate all of the rebates that were out in the market.
Interesting, yeah.
Right? So there's always rebates out there for either commercial or residential or whatever. And a lot of people don't know it, and a lot of end users don't know it.
How does that stand up? I mean, given that the government's in a pretty shaky place, and I haven't really kept on top of what rebates are currently being offered for specific installs or specific technologies. I'm assuming and hoping that a lot of the ones that were there pre-March were still kind of valid, and I'm that's the hope. I don't know this. You might have to fact check us on that. But if they are, I mean, that's definitely something interesting that a lot of the contractors can do. Let's be honest, they're not going to have a lot of spare time. They're very stressed. They're going to be, especially if they have to lay people off and they're just scouring for work. A good thing for a lot of people to do is perhaps, like we talked about earlier, is implement training and have some of your staff train. Is that something that
right now? Well, so it depends on what it is. Like the training, there's, in my opinion, there's no real point in training people to do something that they don't normally do.
Okay.
Right? And the reason I say that is it's like learning a language, right? You can learn the language and you can be proficient at it, but if you don't use it for 5 years, then you're not going to remember the language.
So it's almost as if let's say it's a skill or a particular type of technology or a particular product they're learning about, and if they're not able to install it over the next 3 or 4 months because they don't have the ability to because of the way the world is that almost a failed, kind of not a failed, but a skill that isn't really as relevant?
It's not, like understand what the benefit is. So again, like what I was saying about when we would face our downtimes, we would do that audit. So if we said, listen, like we really want to get into, at that point, it was high velocity. High velocity was the rage, and geothermal as well, right? So it was like, okay, let's go do this training with the intention of getting into it. Yeah. Right? But if, we wouldn't train everybody. We would train 1 or 2 people into that. The other people, we would sit there and update them on the boilers or the forced air systems, right? And we would emphasize that because that was kind of our bread and butter. That's what we did with a lot of frequency. But now is a good time where, like, how many boilers out there have Wi-Fi? Right? Like, okay, let's look into these systems. Let's make sure we know how to install them. Let's make sure that we know, like, oh, now you need to have a router in your boiler room, or maybe it needs to be hardwired. Like, that stuff that we can use that we're going to implement when we start installing again. Right now, I think is a tremendous time to get into indoor air quality.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody's going to be freaking out about this, right?
And that was actually my question from a sales perspective. What should contractors kind of look at is maybe not necessarily low-hanging fruit, but key takeaways and key things. And I think definitely indoor air quality is a huge, huge thing. You know, UV filtration.
Well, just understanding air exchange, right? There's a lot of people who don't, like, you know, the HRV is sold with their house and they've got it installed. They don't know how to change the filters. They don't understand how it works. Right? So at the end of the day, if they hear a beep or there's a light saying service, people just turn it off. And a lot of techs out there maybe haven't had the time to learn what these things do. The difference between HRV, ERVs, you know, what's a MER filter do? What rating is helpful? Stuff like that. So I think the training that you're doing has to be very specific on something that you're going to come out of this and use right away.
Exactly.
If there's a direction that you want to go, then I think it's important to, like, this is a great time to research it. But have somebody in your company that's going to be the guy doing, or the person doing it, that they're now going to be able to invest some time and research and do a pros and cons.
So almost as a, like if your focus as a contracting business is to move into the hydronics world and you really want to focus on hydronic installs, don't send your guys to do geothermal training. Don't send your staff to go and do lav sinks training or faucet training or whatever, just because it's out there and just because it's something they can train on, because it's really not
for the sake of doing it.
Exactly. Training for the sake of training is just as destructive as not doing anything. Right. And I think as much as you'd like to say that the brain is infinite, you know, some of the time, a lot of unnecessary information can kind of interrupt the positive kind of positive impact that you want from training.
Well, let's put it this way. How many guys have forgotten their wife's birthday or anniversary? And that happens once a year. So if you train for it, you get married, you've got it ready, and then all of a sudden you forget it. Like that's the relevant of training that you just aren't going to use every
Our
day.
producer Tom's face is just like just like that over there. He is not. I think he's been on the receiving end of that one far too many times. Maybe want to pivot back to kind of something that we can talk about specific to people in this on the sales side of things, when they're on the phone, when they're on web conferencing. Because we talked about, we don't have body language. We don't have a lot. I mean, minimal. If you have web conference, even then, like, the reaction is either delayed or lagged, and you can't really work off of that. And it's relatively easy to kind of fabricate a lot of that. So I think what we do have at our disposal is our voice and our voice tone, being able to project confidence and being able to speak from a place that instills a sense of calm in either your client or in your supplier, whoever it may be. Something that I learned recently is, when you want to affirm somebody, or with your thought process, or instill create an aura of credibility, it's inflecting down. You want to, I'm telling you that this is the right thing for you to do, or this is the right product for you to choose, right?
Yeah. So I think going back again, we kind of touched on it briefly about knowing what the person does. I think everybody rushes into the sale of, I have to sell this widget.
Yeah.
Right. This is what my company has told me. This is what I have to do. So I have to start selling. Right. And that approach is that wide cast approach. Whereas the more people I talk to about this widget, the more opportunity I have of selling this widget.
Perfect.
right?
Yeah.
And I hate that.
Oh man, it's product sales versus solution sales, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah. So for me, it's like if your phone call today is going to be very dependent on what level of relationship you have with that person. Number one, I think that most sales actually come from a referral.
Yeah.
Right. So
Warm call versus cold call.
well, yeah, and I think it's because the contractors generally talk to each other, so they know what salespeople are taking a vested interest, right? So if it's a new person that you're talking to, the chances are that you have a relationship with somebody that they know, right? So it's phoning them. Hey, like I was talking to Bob, and Bob has. And I have been
Shout out, Bob.
Yeah. Bob and I have been working for X amount of time, and he started to use the product, and I just wanted to know if you're doing similar things and if you have time to talk, and then that's kind of where my sales pitch stopped, and I would actually start to say, okay, well, why don't you tell me a bit about what you're doing, what you want to be doing, because I think those are two very different things.
Absolutely,
as well.
Just like we talked about, kind of figuring out why are you doing something now, and what do you really want to do?
Yeah,
right.
And I think it's also very important to determine if they're a volume sales company, or if they're like a specialist company, right? I find volume tend to do more things because they have the ability to. Whereas small and medium-sized companies kind of zero in and focus on very certain things, right? Yeah. And so that first sales call, in my opinion, is you don't even bring up what you do, right? So, you're really trying to get a foundation of what they do.
And I mean, and this is very interesting because you're making the phone call, you're calling them, you get to dictate the conversation, you get to lead, but without making it obvious that you're leading. With your voice tone and your inflection to kind of ask those leading questions to the other person to get them to tell you as much as possible about their business, about their side of the game, so that then you can come back to them with as much of a tailored, custom, bespoke solution as you want.
And I think at that point you start, it takes you 3 interactions to actually start building a relationship. And that very first
third date is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Third date when the deed gets done.
But that third, so those first 2 interactions, the first one is finding out about them.
Yeah.
And for you, you're really finding out right now if you're spending quality time with somebody or if you're not.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a very important thing. And again, like say it on the phone.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't know if what I have or the solution, the product that I have is actually a fit for your business.
Yeah.
Right. They'll appreciate that you've not wasted your time, and vice versa.
But then the day that you do have something that adds value, they're going to understand that, hey, this guy or this girl wasn't just there to sell me whatever, regardless of whether I needed it or not. They respect the fact that you understood their time was valuable and that you understand that your time is valuable.
Yeah.
That's the key thing, is that your time is limited.
Yes.
As a salesperson, respect your own time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very, very important thing that not a lot of people get, and they're very interested in just kind of vomiting as opposed to absorbing and in kind of, bringing that information that's actually valuable to the customer.
Yeah. Well, and I think getting into that second call, the second call is where you actually tell them about what you do, and you try and limit your first 2 interactions to 15, 20 minutes up to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't try and impose
Absolutely not.
a lot of time in the beginning.
Because it's a new relationship. You don't want to overstep your boundary. You want to kind of be respectful at the same time.
And don't rush it. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's a very important thing, is don't rush it. Don't try and give them everything on the first date.
Absolutely.
Right. Like you're proposing on the first date.
Yeah,
at
don't.
that point, right?
Definitely don't do that.
So settle down. That's you'll definitely forget their birthday at that point. But that second one, now it gives them a bit of information about what you do.
Yep.
And then it's the third meeting. I find the third meeting is when you actually, you've listened to them and what their needs are. You've kind of told them about what you do, like the services that you provide. And then the third meeting is really, that's the sales meeting, right? Okay, like you told me that you do this, and then I kind of told you how we do this. And so what I'd love to do is kind of now, let's pick something that we can move forward on.
Yeah.
Right. And then you've got kind of a dialogue. You've established like my first meeting, I always highlighted, I have a 24-hour rule, right? My 24-hour rule is if you call me, I will return your call, your email, whatever within 24 hours.
So that translates very easily into a working from home, platform where it's that can be something that you establish.
Well, it's also the big thing that I try to emphasize to people is that my schedule is booked out 2 weeks in advance, right? So I'm phoning you today because I've allocated that time to phone X amount of people today, right? If you phone me tomorrow, I might be in meetings, right? So I'm going to phone you. I might be at nighttime. It might be first thing in the morning. It might be through an email, and so on and so forth. And that was kind of because my job was sales and solutions. Yeah. Right. If it was tech support, then there was a number for tech support. You got to pick up your phone,
right?
Well, almost at nighttime, if your tech support's down, yes. But during the day, we've got guys that had that equipment that was live operation. They could follow right down to the color of wire that you needed. So it was very important for me to have my team kind of do what they did best. Yeah. Where at nighttime I was absolutely a resource, but during the day, if my day was booked, that's why I always did a 24-hour rule. And then that way, if it was something urgent, then there was a resource for them to get to. Yeah. If it was like a project planning, then we usually have that time in order to get there. And that was that was always a very important thing about what to expect from me on a communication.
Absolutely. And I think that's really, really important to kind of set that precedent early on, because that really is the foundation of the relationship that you have with that customer, because then they're not going to get upset because you didn't pick up your phone. Because I know a lot of people, especially now that, the phones and emails are pretty much all we have. If you don't pick up your phone, people are going to get upset. What do you mean you didn't pick up your phone or you didn't have your phone? Because, we're sitting by your phone all the time, or you have your email open all the time. You're working from home, right? Like that's the attitude. But I almost think that, as from a salesperson's perspective, maybe establishing that with a client, 24-hour kind of countdown or 24-hour response time also gives you a little bit of a cushion. It's like if you know something went wrong before the contractor or the customer, whoever it is, the engineer, contractor, whoever it is, calls you, something went wrong because you had the information from your own source or from your own organization. Hey, this shipment didn't happen. We're sorry, and that call is coming. You can almost give yourself a little bit of time to diffuse the situation, because there's going to be either a really angry person calling you and you picking up the phone and getting blasted isn't really going to help either party, right?
Well, I think it was also good because if they left a message with some detail on it,
you could get to working on it.
You could actually be prepared for that phone call, whether it was a manual you needed, whether it was a sizing issue that you could actually have the data in front of you. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time to gather, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the things that I would recommend anybody to have on their voicemail. That's a big thing that I really wanted to talk about today is a voicemail. If you can't pick up your phone right now, your voicemail needs to give clear instruction. Your voicemail greeting needs to give clear instruction to that customer or whoever stakeholder is calling you. Please leave a detailed message. I learned this from my first boss, Greg Gillespie. His greeting was short and sweet. It was, "You've reached Greg Gillespie. Leave a detailed message." That's it. And the key was on detail because, and I learned the hard way by not leaving detailed messages for him, because his philosophy was, when I call you back, I've got an answer. Yeah. Right. I'm not calling you back to be like, "Hey, so Vresh, what's going on?" No, it's, "Hey, Vresh, I heard you're looking for this, and this product. This is the stock that we have on this. This is the pricing for this product. We can have it to you in 3 days. Here's, I've already got the stuff ready to go. Your tracking number will be ready as soon as you place the PO." That's the answer you get.
Well, especially if if you guys are both busy, if you're busy and leaving that detailed message, now if you phone them back and you get a voicemail,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden you can leave that information
Yeah.
on their voicemail.
Exactly, because you have the answer, and I think that's really, really key. So your phone is really a huge tool for you right now, and voicemail is a big part of that. And I would highly urge anybody that's listening to, have a very, very polished greeting that urges your customer or your client or whoever it is to leave a detailed message so you can get back to them.
Yeah. I always would leave, like, if I had a busy week or it was a trade show or something like that, I would often leave a message of send me a text and I'll be able to respond quicker.
Yeah.
Right? Because
I remember, yeah.
yeah, and it was, so depending on what was happening that week, I would leave that message of send me a text or send me an email.
Yeah.
And actually somebody about a year ago, there was a manufacturer that I was dealing with, sending them an email would prompt an automatic reply back with all the information, all the different segments.
In case they couldn't get back to you.
And it was like, because of my busy work week, I may not be able to answer this right away.
Yeah.
Here is all the contacts for whatever product you
or problem
need,
that you have, yeah.
or tech support or whatever. And I thought that was brilliant because it gave all the information and it allowed options.
Cool.
And I think part of it is like, we could be the best salespeople in the world, but the only reason why we are so strong is because of our network behind us.
Absolutely.
And when you expose people to that network, then you kind of almost get to brag about what's fueling you, right?
Yeah, and it's really, really a great feeling to kind of have, as an outside salesperson, to have an inside team. And I really wanted to do maybe, a delve into this topic as a whole, in a completely separate podcast, the outside versus inside. I don't even think it's a versus. I think in the outside plus inside equals success, and I really want to talk about that in detail. But I maybe want to pivot to our theme for today, which is from home or selling from home, working from home, and in kind of conclusion, I wanted to maybe bring up a few things that people should avoid getting into, and I think one of the things is internal motivation. I mean, that's a very, very personal thing, is just being driven to work, especially when there's not a lot of stuff happening around you.
Well, again, so like we've talked about it kind of on your auditing of where you're currently at. We've talked about establishing how to start your day and whatever works, right? Making yourself comfortable. Don't try and sit on a wobbly bench all day and try and make calls, stuff like that. That like make a list. Yeah. Right. You would make this list, to-do list anywhere. You probably have one at home. I think we call it honey-do list. Yeah. Make a list. Yeah. What do you have to get done today? Yeah. And I would even say, like, before I take lunch, I want to do this. Before I grab a coffee, I want to do this.
And this kind of comes back to that blog post that we did at 4Media, the SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So have even if it's a goal for the day, make sure you have even micro timelines within that, right? Yeah. I want to do this by lunch, exactly like you said, right? So, and instead of trying to put out fires, I think that mentality can easily kind of take over a salesperson. It's like, oh man, it's such a terrible time.
You never actually
look for the opportunity,
problem,
right? Like look for the opportunity. Like who are the guys that are really doing well right now? Yep. Who are the businesses that are out there selling the crap out of things? Let's focus on them. Pick up the phone. If they're not an account of yours and they're not an account of somebody that's within your organization, pick up the phone and call them, because there's an opportunity for you to do business with somebody. Look outside the confines of the industry that you can sell relevant product to. Yep. Right? And get to know your manufacturers, get to know your suppliers, and maybe there's products, especially if you're in that buy and sell game, a wholesale agency, et cetera, you could really do a lot of damage by understanding what else your manufacturer can do in this time, and what, because they're looking for opportunities to do business as well. Everybody's, hurting in this time. So that's something that, it's don't wait for people to call you. Call people. Yeah. Call as many people as you can.
And again, even if it's just like if it's just for the relationship, because there's a lot to maintaining a relationship, right? There's a lot of people that I used to work for who didn't know what products we had. Like they're like, oh, you guys have this as well.
Yeah.
And number one, you'd kind of be embarrassed that they didn't already know that. But number two, it was a good opportunity to increase your sales with somebody who's already buying your products and will probably can buy your new product because you have that strong relationship and you've met their requirements as 100%. A business, right? So something
else, if from an estimating perspective, if your contractor is just having a tough time, they have to lay a few people off, they don't have as many people to do some of the legwork in the office, put your name in the hat and say, hey, you need some estimating assistance or drawing assistance or speccing assistance. We can definitely work on that for you or help you out with that and work with your colleagues if things are all well within your organization, right? So take on an extra role, go the extra mile for your client. I think that will always work regardless of the scenario, whether it's COVID or not. I think that will always work, especially right now. I think there's an opportunity for you to really kind of strengthen any relationships that you have. We talked about, the 5 a.m. wake-ups for the airport and stuff like that, and you were like, why would you not want to? Something that I really want to stay away from is, especially in the work world, is because you don't have to drive to the office because you don't have to be somewhere, because you don't have that 8 a.m. Breakfast meeting, or the 7:30 a.m. Site meeting or whatever it is. Don't get into that pitfall of waking up late and at 9 a.m. wake up, 10 a.m.
And
wake
when
up.
it does happen, understand how to get yourself out of it. Because we all do it.
Yeah.
We all get burnt out. We all get tired. I remember traveling 5 weeks straight and like just coming home and not being motivated.
Yeah.
So have your solution ready for that. Like for me, I used to go and work usually by a university where everybody's studying and everybody's kind of in there, and that was kind of I would go there and I would kind of like feed off that energy and that would be like, oh, okay, good. So have your solution. Some people can just go work at a park or go for a walk or whatever.
Absolutely.
Right? So.
And other things, this kind of ties back in, especially when you don't have real work hours. Make sure you're not working too much, because then the overtime burnout's a real thing. On the flip side, just things you can do personally, exercise. Absolutely. I mean, I've heard from many doctors right now that alcohol consumption has gone way up during COVID because people are at home more and it's kind of a bit of a dreary mood. So limit your alcohol and cannabis consumption. You don't have to completely cut it out. If you do want to partake, just, set yourself a limit, set boundaries or
I would say limit your screen time too.
That too, absolutely.
Right.
Kind of, especially if it's TV or Netflix or things that aren't really adding value to your life. Mm-hmm. By all means, you don't have to remove it, right? Just be aware. And that's the only thing. Just if you're aware of what you're doing, automatically that serves as a check on yourself. Yeah. Almost that like little bit of a guilt trip. Is like, oh, you know what? I watched 4 hours of TV today. Maybe I should kind of do something else, get out, go for a walk, whatever it is. The other thing, late nights, late nights translate to late mornings, and then we kind of get into that cycle. That's something that I've definitely used to struggle with back in university. The first couple years of working, because I had to take 2 trains and 2 buses to get to work for my first 3 months. So waking up at 5 o'clock was a very new thing for me to go from Toronto to take 2 trains all the way to Hamilton, and then a couple buses to Burlington, and then a couple buses to Hamilton. So get yourself in a rhythm, get yourself in that routine that we talked about. I think that's really important. Key things if you're working from home, especially if you're selling from home, and you're on the phone a lot, you're gonna have fatigue. You're gonna be talking a lot. Take a few breaks. Just take a break and just don't say anything for 5 minutes. Shut your mouth and be quiet for 5 minutes.
Honestly, I would even suggest going for that walk in the park and like leave your phone at home for that 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour, right? Whatever it takes. Yeah, right?
100%. And I mean, the other key thing is that your 8-hour work week or your 8-hour work day is a lot shorter when you're working from home. It's actually more like 6 to 6.5 hours because you don't really have a lot of distractions. And honestly, if you really focus and you have a lot of goals, I think you can get more done at home than you can at work. And you can use that extra hour, hour and a half to get things done in the house, make your, chores, laundry, cook, exercise, whatever it is that you don't usually have time for, right?
Yeah.
And I think the key thing is really to limit and be aware of the distractions.
Yep.
I think that's really important. And with that, I maybe wanted to kind of segue into what we wanted to talk about next time. We'd love to hear from you guys as to what you think we should talk about. What we have in mind is talking about general effects of COVID and the quarantine and the lockdown on the construction industry as a whole. I've been doing a little bit of research just in general about kind of what's happening. Also looking at it from a marketing perspective, I'd love to do just a general podcast on inside versus outside sales. There's so many topics that we can get into.
Yeah, the relationship of how that works, within the team. I think that would probably be our next podcast would be on that relationship.
Absolutely.
And how to effectively utilize that.
Perfect.
Both from the sales side and from the contractor side.
Absolutely.
Right,
And I think, we talk about, all the players in the industry, engineer, contractor, manufacturer, wholesale agent, anybody else that's in there. Everybody's selling something. I think that's what people forget is that, there's these dedicated salespeople that
and
work.
it's not just products.
Right? And it's not just product. You're selling a service. An engineer is the prime example of someone selling a very, very expensive service.
Yeah.
Right? So I'd really like to kind of dive into that, and maybe we can, we can web conference some guests in and kind of have a perspective. I'd love to do. And we're really trying to lay out the a bit of a framework for what we want to do. I'd love to have, get a women in the industry perspective because I know this is a very, very male dominated industry. It's a very, those are things that I'm interested in learning because I don't know what the what a successful woman in this industry's perspective on all the difficulties that they've faced. I'm interested in learning about that stuff. I'm also interested in learning it from a contractor's perspective, from an apprentice, a journeyman, a business owner, seeing everybody's viewpoints and kind of going the distance and really try to, get people talking about construction and building materials. So,
okay, well,
awesome.
Looks like we got a few shows coming up. Then.
Absolutely. So thanks again for tuning in to Talking Apes. We'll touch back with you guys next week. Cheers.